Tired of the old, outdated way of playing fantasy? It's time to try Underdog Fantasy. If you want to make some picks on your favorite sports, check out Underdog Fantasy Pick'em game, where you choose higher or lower on between 2 to 8 players, and you can win up to 1,000 times your initial entry. Make sure to use code CROWDED when you sign up, so you can get up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. Think you know ball better than us? Don't miss out on this great offer and compete against the crew to showcase your knowledge today. Well, welcome back into another episode of The Crowded Booth. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can tell we have a guest now for the second time here on the show. But it was a little bit different as we welcome in Bryan Driskell from Irish Breakdown. Bryan, we were previewing, which, gosh, it feels like it was, a year ago?
Forever ago.
I mean, the season, especially for you guys, has felt like it's been just a track meet for the longest time. But obviously, we're talking about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and this national title game that's on Monday. So, Bryan, first off, I know you and I were talking beforehand. It's exciting to cover this, but at some point you're going to look at the content calendar and be like, okay, man, it's so full. I don't even know if I have enough time in the day to be able to get what I need to get to.
Well, I don't. I mean, I'm going to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning every morning because I got to get to everything, plus running the business. But you know what, man? I wouldn't have it any other way. It's those, what they say, first world problems, right? It's a first world problem I am super glad to have. But it is funny. That was over. Normally, that was game 7 last time we talked.
Yeah.
Normally, that's kind of late in the year. That wasn't even half, based on where they are now, wasn't even halfway through their season. So, yeah, but it's been a great ride. It's been a great ride.
Well, and I've been tuning into y'all's shows as well and keeping up with throughout the season after we had you on to kind of discuss the Georgia Tech Notre Dame game. But for this piece, it's really kind of been cool. And I'll say this, to kind of watch just the evolution of this Notre Dame team. And I kind of wanted to kind of start it off with that. I mean, just in general, I think that, from a national media perspective and folks that are not covering Notre Dame on my side of things, the Irish just kind of felt like this kind of, sleeping giant a little bit of just like, okay, you lost the early season game, but you just got to put your head down and work. Could you talk a little bit about that mentality? And look, we can even go back to that game 7 where at what point or where did you feel like this team was really starting to pick up steam, maybe not getting the notoriety they deserved, but really inside the building and from your perspective?
I think the Louisville game was the game where you felt like, okay, they're starting to turn the corner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, how much could you really gauge from the Purdue game? I mean, that was one of those games where you're watching the other team and you're like, yeah, it's 66-7, but like, this is a bad football team, and they're just way more talented than that team. And then they kind of had a sloppy win over Miami of Ohio, where it was never competitive. They only scored 3 points, but Riley Leonard rushes for a 50-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter to make it 28-3. It was sloppy.
Yeah.
And you came out that first quarter against Louisville and you put up 21 on them. And at the time, that was a defense playing at a pretty high level. And you thought like, okay, I think they're going to be okay. But, they still got work to do. How good can they really be? And it was really just sort of each week you just saw something new. But when you came out against Stanford on October 12th, the week before the Georgia Tech game, and you saw the offense really look a lot different, running more RPO game, doing things that Riley Leonard was more comfortable with, you kind of felt like, okay, I think Mike Denbrock's starting to figure out what Riley's good at and what the offense needs to look like. Because you think about it, they didn't have him all spring. So he wasn't, which receivers was he really clicking with? You didn't really know, what route concepts is he really good at? I mean, quarterbacks say all the time, oh, I like that concept, coach. I like him. And then you're like, yeah, you may like it, but you can't complete it. You know what I mean? And so you got to learn those things over time. And I think Mike Denbrock did a great job of, you're coaching what you think you have early, and then you find out what you really have, and you say, okay, do I keep doing what I want to do, or do I coach? It's like this: do you coach the team you want, or do you coach the team you have? Yeah. And Mike Denbrock was able to kind of start coaching the team he has, because you got to learn who you have first, right? And that's when they started to turn the corner. But I really felt like that Georgia Tech game, because one of the questions I had going into that game was, are they going to be good enough stopping the run to really make a run at this thing?
Yeah.
And when they come, like, I know they didn't have Haynes King, but like, you still completely shut down that run game and Jamal Haynes. And I joked, busting some Georgia fans' chops. I'm like, y'all know Haynes King had more yards on his first carry of the game against Georgia than he had the entire game. Actually, more twice than he had the entire game against Notre Dame, right? But that's when you really started to see, like, okay, the defensively, they're going to be really good. And then, of
Yeah.
course, the next week against Navy, they absolutely obliterated what I think is a really good Navy team. And then you're like, okay, they're going to be all right. But I don't know that you really felt like this is a championship caliber team until they beat Georgia, because that was really the
Yeah.
first time they played a team where you're like, okay, all the other teams they beat since the Northern Illinois game are teams they had way better rosters than. Let's be honest about it. I mean,
Yeah.
Louisville's a good football team. They had a way better roster than Louisville. I mean, they could kind of out talent a lot of those teams. Same with Indiana. Indiana's a really good football team, but Notre Dame's got a lot better players than Indiana for the most part across the board. It was when they beat Georgia the way they did, just suffocated Georgia's offensive line. And, you got the big kick return. You're just like, look, they got the athletes. Like, I mean, you could talk about this questionable call, that questionable call, but at the end of the day, it's like you had to make those plays. I mean, you had to beat Monroe Freeling 3 times for sacks, and a kid who hadn't, I think, given up a sack since like week 2, something like that. And you watch the kick return, and you just like, this team athletically is really good. And this team physically is really good. And even without Riley Mills, was able to go out there and whoop Georgia in the trenches. At least their defense did. And then said, okay, this team can play with anybody now. And that's when you knew that this team was really on that level. You always knew they were really, really good. But, with all the injuries, could they really play with the big dogs? No pun intended. And that's what they've shown, obviously, the last 2 games.
Well, and look, I'm not going to lie to you, Brian, I grew up in SEC country, and there's a certain stigma when it comes to seeing Notre Dame that I know that you're well acquainted with, and you and I follow each other on social media. So I see the back and forth that you have with fans that maybe have slighted Notre Dame. And I at one point was probably in that crowd. I think one of the big things, and you kind of hit on this, was just the athleticism. I feel like it's taken a leap under Marcus Freeman. Is that more of a, and we're going to talk obviously about the national title game, but is that something that surprised you? Or did you feel like coming into the season they had that type of athleticism, especially on the defensive side of the football, that could match up with, look, just this perceived notion that the SEC has bigger, better, faster athletes?
Right.
I felt like going into that Georgia game, Notre Dame could match what Georgia wanted to do offensively, sideline to sideline wise, and it kind of looked like that.
I think the issue is people who don't cover Notre Dame on a daily basis are still living in the past of what Notre Dame genuinely was. I mean, when Notre Dame got on the stage, they genuinely didn't have the athletes they'd have a guy here, a guy there, but I felt like there's always been a little bit of a misconception about Notre Dame's athleticism. Like in 2015, did Notre Dame lack athleticism when they had Will Fuller and Jalen Smith and CJ Prosise? And no, they lacked certain things on that team. There's been years where, in 2009, did Notre Dame lose because they had lacked athleticism when their skill players were Michael Floyd and Golden Tate and Kyle Rudolph? No, there were always things, but they were lacking it on defense. So there was years they had it here, but they didn't have it there. They had it at this position, but not that position. There were years their offense was championship caliber, but their defense wasn't, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And what Marcus Freeman has done a great job of since he was hired was building all phases of the team. And in fact, the joke that I have had up until this current cycle that just signed, they'd recruited offense better under Marcus Freeman than defense, even when you look at the big time quarterbacks they've signed and the talent at running back. I mean, Notre Dame's got it. And this is what I think people woke up to in the postseason, which is this Notre Dame running back room is as good as anybody in the country.
Yeah.
It's as dynamic as anybody in the country. And it's like, we talked about that before the season, and I think that was the thing is like, because I do follow all these recruits and I do break down these recruits. And I did see this, I watched them against Ohio State last year. They didn't lose to Ohio State because they lacked athleticism. They lost Ohio State because they weren't good enough at quarterback. And, you dropped an interception late in the game and you 10 guys, but you went toe to toe with Ohio State athletically. Marvin Harrison and back games against Notre Dame failed to get to 100 yards. Not 100 yards in a game. He failed to get to 100 yards in both games combined. Why? Because Notre Dame had an elite secondary. And I think there just weren't enough people willing to recognize that. There were some, like Greg McElroy talked before the season. He goes, I think this might be the best secondary in college football. I'm like, thank you. Finally somebody. and like with the running back room, I said, look, I understand why the national media doesn't view this running back room the way they do, because it's not proven like the Penn State kids and Ohio State kids. Mike, but this running back room will take a backseat to no one. And the game against Penn State showed that. I mean, Penn State bottled up Jeremiah Love. They bottled up Jadarian Price. But then who breaks the game open in the third quarter? Aeneas Williams, their third string, third down freshman running back. And if something happens to those guys, they got a kid named Keidron Young who's a monster on the bench. And that's been the thing that Marcus Freeman has done, is he's been able to bring in the kind of athleticism and length that you need. Notre Dame's linebacking core showed in that Georgia game. Yeah, Georgia's got a great linebacking core. So does Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that has opened people's eyes. But I also understand why a national person who doesn't study the team, who watched them lose to Northern Illinois, would come away thinking, same old Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. No, it's the casual take, and that happens. I mean, like you said, the day-to-day coverage means a lot, and that's why I'll just plug it halfway during the show here. That's why you should tune in to Irish Breakdown, because they got the good day-to-day coverage over there of the Fighting Irish. Wanted to get these quick hitters here for you. What's something you like about this matchup against Ohio State for Notre Dame, and what's something that has you a little uneasy heading into Monday night?
Well, I'll take the uneasy one first, and it's that skill talent on offense and just how stifling this defense has been all year. I mean, this is a great, in my opinion, these are the two best defenses in college football.
Yeah.
And look, I wrote an article when the 2 games are over. I said, look, both of them had a bad day, Notre Dame and Ohio State. But if you look at the course of the season, these are the 2 most dominant teams in college football this year. Outside of, Ohio State having that really bad day against Michigan, and then Notre Dame having that really bad day in Northern Illinois. Well, why? Well, they're kind of similar. They both have elite stifling defenses. That's the number 1 and 2 pass defenses in the country. They're built somewhat similarly structure-wise defensively. They both have dynamic playmakers on offense, and their most dynamic playmakers named Jeremiah on both teams, right? Both have great running back rooms. Ohio State obviously has a better receiver room. Notre Dame has a better offensive line. Will Howard's a better passer than Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard's a far more dynamic playmaker. But, like, in a lot of ways, they're very similar football teams. And in a lot of ways, you're going strength on strength. Notre Dame's got a great run game. Ohio State's got the number 1 run defense in the country. Ohio State has a great great skill in the passing game. Notre Dame's got the number 1 ranked pass defense in the country in quarterback rating and completion percentage. And so it's like, look, you can go toe-to-toe with what they do best. Yeah. I think that's the thing that makes you say they can do it. And we've seen it last 2 years. I mean, 2 years ago, Ohio State beat Notre Dame 21-10 with C.J. Stroud, but Notre Dame had a lead until 30 seconds left in the third quarter. And in that game and went toe to toe. CJ Stroud had one of his least, effective performances of his, least productive. He was actually made some money throws in that game. But Notre Dame basically was like, you're going to have to complete perfect balls because we're going to be all over your receivers. And that's exactly what CJ Stroud did. Is he made some throws. You're just like, I don't know what to tell the DB on that one. Like, you were where you needed to be. He just did that. And then last year, of course, they shut the offense down again. So it's one of those things where you feel like they have the talent, the speed to go toe to toe if they can play their game. But the offensive line is going to have to play well. And that's a concern too, is you're going against a really good defense with now an offensive line that has now 2 more injuries. And that's been the story of the season is that right there. You often wonder, man, what would Notre Dame look like if they had Jagasol all year, and Ashton Craig was still healthy, and Boubacar Traore was still healthy, and Riley Mills was still playing, and Benjamin Morrison was still playing. I mean, their best corner hasn't played since the 6th game of the year. You know what I mean? And they still have the pass defense they have. Why? Because Marcus Freeman went out and recruited Leonard Moore when nobody else thought he was an elite player. Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens did, just like when they went and got Benjamin Morrison. And that goes back to what we talked about before. You've got to be great at talent evaluation to recruit at Notre Dame, because you're going to have to find some of those studs that nobody else knows about. And Mike Mickens, especially in the secondary, has done a phenomenal job with that. He's, in my opinion, the best in the business at that, and then the development piece.
Yeah, 2 important key pieces, obviously, especially in the portal area, NIL area, being able to kind of find those guys.
I mean, Bryce, 5 years ago, would you have been like, yeah, Notre Dame's going to have 2 first-team true freshman All-Americans in 3 years?
Yeah.
Corner.
Yeah, I wouldn't have.
No, you wouldn't have. I wouldn't have, dude. I'd have been like, okay, bro. I mean, look, I'm as big as Notre Dame fan as anybody, but let's not pump the sunshine too much. You know what I mean? But that's exactly what they did with Benjamin Morrison in 2022, and now Leonard Moore in 2024. And actually, I think Christian Gray made like a 2nd-team freshman All-American last year.
Yeah.
Not the main ones, but I think he made like a 2nd-team one. And you're like, it's not luck. I mean, it's like when you do it year after year after year, and wait till y'all see Notre Dame's cornerback room next year with Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary and Cree Thomas. Like, when you do it, keep doing it year after year, you're like, no, they're just good at it. It's not luck anymore. They didn't just get like lucky with that one guy, now they just like, yeah, they're actually pretty good at that.
Yeah, it becomes somewhat of a track record that you kind of
Right.
have to acknowledge whether you like it or not.
Right.
You mentioned this, and I can't wait to get the chance to talk to him down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. Riley Leonard is going to head down essentially back home from Fairhope, not too far away. And you mentioned the game changing ability, and it's not the flashiest, but it's dynamic in the only way that I feel like Riley Leonard can be. And
Mhm.
I've grown very fond, and obviously, with my ACC background, watched a lot of him at Duke and just what he brought to the table, and have talked with people about it's just what's in between the ears. What has
Mhm.
made him special? What makes him such a weapon for this game on Monday night? And really, why I feel like if you're not a Buckeye fan, a lot of people are rallying behind. Whether they
Yeah.
like Notre Dame or not, they're rallying behind Riley Leonard. What makes him that infectious attitude and a guy that everyone wants to play with?
Was genuine. I mean, number one, it's a genuine attitude. It's a genuine humility, and I think that matters. It
Mhm.
matters to players. But the other part of it too is he just plays a gritty game.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you watch an elite quarterback and you're like, "Well, that guy's really talented," but like he's just, he's special. When you look at Riley, you're just like, he's not an elite athlete. He's a much better athlete than people give him credit for,
Mhm.
but he's
He's a
not
good
an elite
basketball player,
athlete.
Brian. Don't
Very good
don't slight
basketball
him.
player. Trust me, I've seen that highlight tape before it started making the rounds this past week. Riley Leonard was the guy that we wanted as at Irish Breakdown. We wanted Notre Dame to pursue in the portal because we had to prepare for this kid last year.
Yeah.
Watching them, and Notre Dame fans will be like, well, no, he only went like 19 of 33 against, or 17 of 33 against Clemson, and then they only threw for like 170 something yards. I'm like, you just don't understand the impact the quarterback has in the game. That's
Mhm.
like him. And that's always been the knock. Well, look at his numbers. I'm like, yeah, look at his numbers. He's got 3,500 yards of total offense and 35 touchdowns on the season. And last I checked, rushing touchdowns for a quarterback counted just as much as passing touchdowns for a quarterback, which I think some fans
Yeah.
kind of forgot this year, including ESPN, who kept saying, well, he's only thrown for 3 touchdown passes. I'm like, yeah, he's ran for 10. Like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like, touchdowns are
Both count for 6
touchdowns, but
points.
it's just that playmaking ability, and what that does to a defense is you have to alter how you normally play your defense to account
Mhm.
for that ability. I mean, we've seen games this year, Bryce, where it's like you get the perfect call. You had USC did this first drive of the game when Notre Dame goes down and scores first drive of the game. It's second down, I believe. And they bring a corner fire, and Notre Dame just doesn't have there's just nobody to count for it. And then Riley just kind of waits and then just spins out, rolls left, and picks up 4 yards. That should have been a drive-ending earhole quarterback sack, and he just spins out of it. And he does that so often where it's like you think you have him beat. I mean, Notre Dame ranks in the top 25 in sacks allowed, and I tell people that's one of the most misleading stats you will ever see. Because if any quarterback on their roster, and there's some dudes on their roster now. Wait till you see CJ
Mhm.
Card and Kenny Minchie in the spring, but they're not the athletes that Riley is. They don't have that feel in the pocket or not the feel. They don't have that escapability in the pocket to just like that should have been an easy sack. And then he gets out like look at the Purdue game. Steve Angeli did some nice things, but he got sacked like 3 times when he came into the game. It's like same thing was happening in the first half, but Riley was making dudes miss. But at the end of the day, it's like this, Bryce. You've heard this a million times. You cover sports. You do a great job. But you say this about quarterbacks. I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
And that's Riley Leonard. I can't explain to you why he's a playmaker, why he's a dynamic guy, why he makes his team so good. I just see it,
Mhm.
you can't recruit that kind of thing. I mean, that's why a guy like him gets overlooked because you can't, you're looking for traits. You're looking for this, you're looking for that. And sometimes you can miss. This guy just has it. This guy just has it. This guy gets the best of everyone around him. Like I got to do my best because I know Q is going to give me everything he's got. And
Yeah.
and that's really worked for him. And he was the perfect quarterback for it. They needed a guy like him this year, in
Yeah.
my opinion. That kind of playmaker type of guy to win. And that's what he's done.
Got 2 more here for you, and I think it kinda could go hand in hand. Uh, Notre Dame wins this game if I know you listed out some of the concerns that you had maybe going into this and some of the strengths, but what has to happen in order for Notre Dame to win this game? And then I'll even kinda give you the second question to it. What does this mean for this program? For not just the playing in this game, which
Mhm.
is in this new 12-team playoffs, not an easy feat by any
No.
means to even get here, and that needs to be praised and mentioned. But what does it mean if Marcus Freeman and this Notre Dame team is is raising the trophy late on Monday night or early into Tuesday morning.
You want to know the biggest difference between this team and the teams that have played on this level in the past, Bryce? This is the first time Notre Dame has been on a stage where you're like, they don't have to do anything superhuman. They don't need the other team to make a bunch of mistakes. To beat Clemson in 2018, you needed to go hit the inside straight. Now, could you have done it? Sure, you could have done it. I mean, it was a very close game until Julian Love goes down, and then they scored 21 quick points and blew the game open. But that was the difference in that team. You lose one guy at corner and you were a different football team. Now you lose an All-American at corner and you're like, we're good. You know what I mean? Like, would love to still have Benjamin Morrison, but we're fine. And that's just what this team has been. But this is the first time where they say, well, what do they got to do to win? And my answer is play your game. I mean, you're one of the best rushing teams in college football. Act like it. You know what I mean? Like you're one of the best pass defenses of college football. Act like it. You know what I mean? It's like, look, let's get corny, right? Let's use a quote from the movie Rudy. You know what I mean? He's like, hey, you're an All-American, and a captain, act like it, and it's like, that's Notre Dame. It's like, dude, do what you do what got you here, run the football. Riley's got to make some plays, shut down the running game, limit the passing game. Yeah, you're going to give up a play here and a play there. You're not going to shut down that entire receiving corps. Because if you do shut down Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka like Texas did, guess what? You still got to deal with Cardinal Tate and Travion Henderson out of the backfield. That's what makes this Ohio State team so good. But, give up your play here, play there, but shut down the run game. Get after the quarterback. Do what you've been doing all year. Make game-changing plays. Force turnovers as the number one turnover forcing team in the country. And then make some special teams plays. Like the turnover thing makes me laugh because I listen to Georgia fans talking about, well, if not for 2 turnovers, like Georgia just laid the ball on the ground. It wasn't a Don Schuler put his helmet right on the football, knocking it out. It wasn't, RJ Oben coming from behind, whooping the left tackle and strip sacking the quarterback. They weren't like Navy had 6 turnovers against Notre Dame, and 2 of them were literally the dude just dropped the ball. There wasn't a defender near him; he just dropped the ball. You're like, okay, that I could be like, well, if we don't do that, we might not have lost 51-14, maybe not, But it's like y'all act like those things weren't like perfectly forced plays, and that's what Notre Dame does every year. And it's like I listen to Josh Pate, who I like, and he's like, I just don't think they can win because I don't think you can do this. Keep doing this. And I'm like, dude, we're 15 games in, and this is exactly how they've won football games. They haven't forced a turnover in one game. It's only one game they haven't forced a turnover in, and I know which game. Which game it was. It's Northern Illinois. It's not a fluke anymore, Josh. We're 15, and again, I love Josh, but it's like we're 15 games in. This is who they are.
Yeah.
And so that's my thing, Bryce, is this is the first time I've seen Notre Dame on this stage. 2020 Bama, you needed this, you need to do this, this, and this, plus you needed to force, you need to do this, you need this to go your way, you need that to go your way. Same thing against 2020 Bama, 2018 Clemson. This is one of those games where it's like, dude, you're every bit as good as them. Play your game. You play your game, they can't play theirs. Like people ask, well, if both teams play their A game, who wins? Well, that's not possible. Because if I play my A game on defense, you can't play your A game on offense. Because if you are playing your A game on offense, I'm not playing my A game on defense. You know what I mean? Like, you can have 2 units. Like you can have the 16 Rose Bowl, USC's offense and Penn State's offense both brought their A games. And a buddy of mine was like, well, they both play their A games. I'm like, you think either one of those defensive coordinators thought that they played their A game in a 52-49 game? No, the 2 offenses did. And so that's really their thing is play your game. If you play your game, you're going to make it harder for them to play theirs. And I think that's the biggest difference, Bryce. And that may sound cheap but it's like, this is who you are. Shut down the run, limit the effectiveness of the pass game, get after the quarterback, run the football, make some big plays, force some turnovers, make game-changing special teams plays, which you saw them do against Georgia Tech, I think twice. This is who they've been all year. And when you've done something for 15 games, and you get to this championship to the point you made earlier, you could argue, and people have done this, I don't buy it, in 18 and 12, they didn't belong there. They didn't play a tough enough schedule. Nonsense. But now you can't say that anymore. You can't say, well, somebody was like, well, they had an easier bracket. It's literally a Texas fan said that to me. Well, Notre Dame had played an easier bracket. I'm like, bruh, really? They beat the team that but they had their backup quarterback. The backup quarterback who came into the game against y'all down 6 and led them to a win. Like, you might want to sit this one out. You know what I mean? So, it's just play your game. You didn't get to this point by accident. Notre Dame's won 14 games this year. 12 of them have been by double digits.
Yeah. No, and I like what you said in the beginning. It's, a matchup of 2 of the more dominant teams, I've kind of felt like, as I've looked at more of Notre Dame, they've been probably the most consistent team. And
Yeah.
what you said there too, Brian, is really important because everyone wants to point and laugh at the Northern Illinois game. And you know what? Notre Dame fans will let you laugh at it all
Yeah.
the whole
'Cause they
off
needed
season
it.
if they get to hoist that trophy on Monday. They
Yeah.
don't care. That's more of the outlier situation than
Right.
when you look at the data points over the course of the full season. The last one for you here, man. I know I kind of mentioned it, and it was a long-winded question, but what does it mean for this program to be
Yeah.
here in this spot? And then obviously, if they win this one, just how does it galvanize Notre Dame into this new era of college football from a branding? I mean, obviously, we know what the Notre Dame brand is, but
Mhm.
just for everything for what they want to do and accomplish.
Well, it's my long-winded answer. I forgot the other part of that, so that's my apologies. But really smooth, professional way of recovering that one there. I appreciate that, Bryce. Um, I mean, there's a lot of different things for Notre Dame fans beyond just like, hey, you're champs.
Yeah.
Number one, if you win this game, you've literally slayed every potential dragon that you've had left, right? And Notre Dame's had all these like dragons you got to slay. You can't beat top SEC teams. Okay, you beat two of them this year, and one of them on the road in the game. You say, it's the toughest place to play. Okay,
Mhm.
which I've noticed there's like 5 different SEC places this year that I heard is the toughest place to play on ESPN. It's like Kyle Field, where Arkansas plays. LSU is like, okay, guys, but you hadn't beaten Georgia literally ever. I mean, you're
Yeah.
0 for 3 against Georgia, and the SEC champs, and you beat them. And you haven't won a New Year's Six game since January 1st of 1994. I
Mm.
was literally 16 years old. I'm 46. I was 16 years old actually 15 years old because it was on January 1st. I didn't turn 16 till later. I was 15. I couldn't even legally drive the last time Notre Dame won a New Year's Six game. They've won 2 in a
Mm.
week.
Yeah.
You couldn't. I literally saw an analyst. I'm trying to remember who it was. Some like well-known person who's like, who was, you might know when I say it. He's like, if Notre Dame playing the Big Ten, they'd struggle. And I'm like, well, they're 2-0 against the Big Ten now in the postseason,
And
right?
2 of the best teams in the Big
Yeah,
Ten.
right, exactly. And then, you can't compete for championships because let's insert this prejudice accusation against Southern athletes, like you can't recruit top athletes. And I've always argued, like, okay, you can't recruit top players, huh? No, you can't recruit top athletes. They don't want to go to Notre Dame. Why? Academics. All right, cool. Well, offensive linemen want to go to Notre Dame. Tight ends want to go to Notre Dame. So who are we talking about here? Let's
Yeah.
get specific. Who are we talking about?
Yeah.
And you know who they're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's always been a lie. It's always been false. It was more about Notre Dame didn't give them reasons to come to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And so you go out there and you win that game with a bunch of kids who go to class and do the work and do all those things. And you kill that narrative. Because my thing is, you think Ohio State doesn't have kids like people are talking about that go to class and care about those things? You don't think Georgia? Yes, Georgia's got an embarrassment of a graduation rate, but you don't think there's any kids that go to Georgia and like, hey, I want to get an education. I mean, Myron Rolle
Yeah.
turned down Notre Dame to go to Florida State, became a neurosurgeon,
Yeah.
a Rhodes Scholar. Reggie Bush is over a 3.0 student. He could have easily gotten in Notre Dame, but would you have wanted to go to Notre Dame back then if you also had USC as an option? Cool. I mean, you're a Notre Dame fan, and I probably still would have picked USC at that point in time, But now you kick down that door, you kill you silence all that noise, you get rid of all the stereotypes, all the talking points, all the stigmas. You can't get top athletes, you can't do this, you can't do that. All that's dead.
Mhm.
And I've said this for a long time, Bryce. I've learned this covering recruiting and doing this for a long time. It'd be wild to me covering a kid who's looking at, for example, Florida, Florida State, and Notre Dame. And both of those schools would negatively recruit against Notre Dame. It's like they would have rather seen that kid go to their rival than to go to Notre Dame. Because I think a lot of SEC coaches know if Notre Dame ever kicks down that door, especially with a guy like Marcus Freeman.
Yeah.
Now, with Brian Kelly, it's a different deal because you're like, yeah, he's still kind of I don't even say it. I'm going to keep it PG today. But with Marcus Freeman, who
Oh,
he
yeah.
is, and if they kick down that door, good luck recruiting against Notre Dame. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like, and that's been the fear for a lot of people is if kids realize, like, hey, you can actually go get a great education, you can actually play for championships and actually be developed at an elite level. All of a sudden, some of those kids are going to start making that decision to go up there, and you only need 1 or 2 a year to change the game.
That's true.
right? You just need that one Jeremiah. Could you imagine this Notre Dame team if they had a Jeremiah Smith or a Ryan Williams on their team? Could you imagine what this Notre Dame team would be? Right, and that's my whole point. It's like I said this about the 17 Notre Dame team. If you just took Lamar Jackson and put them on that Notre Dame 17 team, that's the only change you make with that offensive line and that run game and that defense. Are you kidding me? You know, and they've always been that a guy here, a guy there away from being that team. And now they've done that. And of course, what Marcus Freeman's done a beautiful job of is he's built depth. And that's something that Notre Dame never had for a long time is depth. And it's going to make it fun to watch. But for me, it's more about the death of those narratives that I felt were always built on prejudice and just ignorance about kids that don't want to do this, this, and this. They did. But Bryce, if you were going to go major in engineering, wouldn't you want to go pick the school that was the best engineering program, gave you the best chance to be successful after college? Yeah. So if you want to be an NFL football player, you may care about academics, but if that's your chosen profession, aren't you want to go somewhere that's going to help prepare you to be an NFL player? So I may care about academics, but if I'm a defensive lineman looking at Notre Dame versus Alabama, you know, I got some business decisions to make. I can still, if I care about academics, I can still get a good education there. Right. Well, Notre Dame's killing that narrative now. They've already kind of killed it to a degree.
Oh, true. Yeah.
But if they win it all by beating Georgia, Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, that narrative's dead. Yeah. It's completely dead. And I think that allows Notre Dame to couple those kids they've missed on each year. You now start to get, and that's how they start stringing together. Because you know how Notre Dame is, right? You get that one, that's great, but now you need to do it again. Yeah, and that's what it's like at Notre Dame, you know, and that'll be the expectation. And honestly, that's what Marcus Freeman will want. That's what Chad Bowden will want, is to say, look, we plan to do this every year. Now you're not gonna do it every year, but that's always the goal.
It's the outlook,
right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that a lot. And you want that type of pressure, right? You want that type of expectation in and around your program.
Well, you'd think so, but they have had coaches here recently who didn't necessarily like that expectation and spent a lot of time talking down that expectation to make himself look better. I don't name names, who left Notre Dame because he wanted to be able to compete for championship somewhere else. Although he's now denying that he ever said that, and I have receipts that he said that. But just like, for example.
I'll plead the fifth on that because we do have some, but I'll let you. But I know
you got an LSU.
I gotta. You got to stay where business is good, and business is good right now. But no,
LSU fans already hate me, so I'll say it. I'll say it.
I love it. Bryan Driskell, Irish Breakdown. Obviously, I know I've shouted out what you guys do, but just kind of tell people if they want to catch the post-game live, pre-game stuff, and all the stuff leading up to Monday night, Bryan, where can they find your work and your entire team?
So if you like YouTube shows, go to YouTube and type in Irish Breakdown. We do live shows every day at 1:00. If you are more of a podcast person, go ahead and in your podcast app, type in Irish Breakdown. If you want to read our free content, go to irishbreakdown.com. Y'all, I try to make it as easy as possible for you.
2 words.
And then we also have a premium message board, and it's at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So and we do a little bit of product placement here during our shows, but it's Irish Breakdown, and our name kind of explains who we are, right? We don't just, we're not like a news organization. We break the game down. We look at things differently. We dig into the weeds. We talk about scheme, X's and O's, and things like that, and matchups, and try to use my background as a coach to bring a different perspective to Notre Dame coverage. And so that's what we do. You can find it at Irish Breakdown anywhere that you podcast platform, whatever you listen to, YouTube channel. Or if you want to read our free content, you can check that out at irishbreakdown.com.
I love it. Just 2 words. Keep it simple for everybody.
It's my wife's idea. We were trying to think of what to name it when I started my own company. And she's like, well, what about Irish Breakdown? It's like, you're a genius. This is why I married you. You're beautiful and you're smarter than I am. And my dad was always like, find somebody better looking than you and smarter than you, son. And I did that.
Check the box. There you go.
That. Yep.
Love it. There's a message to all the young people.
There is.
There is. Young
marry up.
I love it.
Marry up. Outkick your coverage. And I did that incredibly well.
It's going to be a fun Monday night. And like you said, make sure to check out all the coverage they have going on there, but not just for this next couple of days throughout the off season, which we know, Bryan, there truly is no off season.
Nope. No, we'll be going live at 1:00 every day in the off season, just like we do during the season, man.
It's great. I absolutely love it. Bryan Driskell, Irish Breakdown. We appreciate him joining and hopping on, talking a little bit of the Notre Dame angle. You can tune in on Thursday night. We'll be live around 7:30 Central Time to give our opinions on the game. And Bryan, you've said a lot here, and I don't know if it's just a recency bias, but I've picked Notre Dame every single step of the way. So I've done that, and I really, I cover a team that I'm not necessarily a fan of, but you have rooting interest because you build relationships with people. But it's just I know I cover a team that is led by that maybe that same person that you were talking about earlier, but it's really hard to not root for Marcus Freeman in Notre Dame, and I think that's just something that you just like the way he carries himself.
Isn't
like
that
the way
weird though? Like that's not what normally people have felt about Notre Dame in the past. Like you see all these stories, like Ari Wasserman at On3 wrote one, like he's made Notre Dame likable, and I'm like, that's very true because I get why a lot of people don't like Notre Dame for all those years. I mean, I get it. I'm not blind to that, but it is because he's a genuine guy. And then you look at some of their stars. Xavier Watts is a great story, and Riley Leonard's just a great kid and a great story. And there's a lot of those type of kids, at Notre Dame. You look at Jeremiah Love, he turned down way bigger NIL offers to go to Notre Dame because he wanted to get that degree. He wanted to be challenged in the classroom, and he's a kid who likes to draw, and he has his own comic book thing that he does. It's just really good kids, and they're hard to not root for. We as Notre Dame fans can maybe make them hard to root for at times. We all have those, right? We all have those fan bases. But I just like how you summed me up. You described me perfectly. You said a lot there. Yep, that pretty much – you just broke down Irish Breakdown, man. You just did it. You did it.
I love it. Bryan Driskell, Irish Breakdown. We appreciate the time. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and like he said, you can go on all those feeds, type in the Crowded Booth or Irish Breakdown to get some great college football content, not just for the next couple of days, but all throughout the offseason. And before we know it, it's going to be media days, and then we'll be right back into fall camp. And, man, it's a sport we love to cover. So we'd love to have you join alongside us for all of that content. We'll catch you next time here on the Crowded Booth.